All right, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to the Kiterunner. I'm sure you have seen the reading assignment and you see that you're responsible for reading the first 9 chapters of the Kiterunner. Please do not be alarmed. I think you'll find that those 9 chapters go by relatively quickly. But before you begin to read the novel, I think there are a few things that we definitely need to discuss. So the first thing we should talk about very briefly is the author, the person that created this novel, and that's Khalid Asani. And he was actually born in Afghanistan, and that is, of course, the setting for the large part of our novel. So he does have firsthand knowledge of the country that he is writing about. And he would actually leave Kabul, a place in Afghanistan, for Iran, only to come back a short time later. So he actually, was involved with Afghanistan during some of the kind of rough patches in history. And this certainly changed and shaped his life. He would eventually come to America, and what he would experience was very similar for many people from this region that were coming to America, because in Kabul and in Afghanistan, his country or his people, his parents were relatively well off. However, when they came to America, they found themselves in poverty. So it was a very different experience. And eventually, actually, Khalid would become a doctor, but he would then become a novelist later in his life, and that, of course, is when he created the Kiterunner. Now, let's talk a little bit about the people of Afghanistan first, okay? There are basically 5 ethnicities in Afghanistan. There is Pashtun, Tajik, Hazara, Uzbek, Baluchi, and Turkoman. And very heterogeneous people. They live amongst one another. And one thing they share in common is that they are all Muslim. They are all Muslim. It's not like America where we have many different religions. They are all Muslim. However, there are 2 types of Muslims predominantly. They're the Sunni and the Shia Muslims, and this is extremely important. Let's take a look at this YouTube video. And basically, actually, you might want to watch this on your own. Let's see how long it is here. No, it's short enough. This is very important.
Shia split is highly divisive throughout the Middle East. The world's 1.6 billion Muslims all agree that Allah is the only God and Muhammad his messenger. They all follow the 5 same ritualistic pillars of Islam, including Ramadan and observing the Quran. And some differences between the two are minor. The Shiites pray with their hands by their sides, and the Sunnis pray with their hands crossed at their chest or stomach. The key schismatic difference is rooted in the question of who should succeed Muhammad after his death in 632. So this is something that's been going on for 1400 years, and it breaks down something like this. The Sunnis believed that his successor should be his follower, Abu Bakr, a friend of the Prophet's and father of his wife. Others thought that Muhammad's kin should be his rightful successor. They claimed that the Prophet had anointed Ali, his cousin, and therein lies the conflation of the name. They should be followers or Shiat Ali, which gets conflated to Shia or Shiites, and they should be the partisans of Ali. So whilst Sunnis rely heavily on the practice of the Prophet and his teachings, the Shia regard the Ayatollahs as reflections of God on earth. Now that in of itself leads to issues because the Sunnis believe that the Shias, as a result of this, putting too much emphasis on the Ayatollahs, are essentially heretics. Now, you may ask, why does all this matter? Well, it matters for a number of reasons. And just think about it in these terms. 85 to 90% of all Muslims are Sunnis, the balance being Shias. And in the Middle East at the moment, the majority, so all of the Gulf states, are Sunni states. Iran and Iraq.
Okay, so this is what is important for us to understand. What this gentleman has pointed out to us very precisely, by the way, is that he has pointed out to us that the vast majority of people that are Islam are Sunni. The Shias are in the minority. And unfortunately for the Shia, they are the minority in every aspect of the word. Okay? They are considered the minority. Now, is it super important for us to understand the difference religiously between the two? Not really, for the novel's sake. I mean, we understand that obviously when the original prophet had died, there was a division between who the followers would then look to, and that's what caused the problem. But really, the main thing for us to keep in mind is that the Sunni are the majority and the Shia are not. And for us to keep this in mind, we look at that list. The two main groups of people we will be dealing with in the Kiterunner are Pashtun and Hazara. Okay, and so Pashtun people, of course, are Sunni, and then our Hazara people are Shia. And that's something to keep in mind as you begin to read the novel. Because in this country, it is very definitive that the Hazara are a minority. And they are discriminated against and utilized as servants, and they seem to be very resigned and very accepting of their roles. So let's talk about the history of Afghanistan now. So the history of Afghanistan is certainly tumultuous, and it starts just unfortunately because of their geographical location. It's the heart of Asia. Everyone seems to want a part of it. So it all starts in 1973, and up until this part, there was a monarchy. It was overthrown, and one of the revolutionaries declared himself president. So they basically overthrew the king and said, hey, I'm the leader now, right? And a few years later, he then was overthrown by the same people who put him in power. Oftentimes when you do things like this, your rule is certainly not going to be stable. This would continue until the Soviet Union invaded in 1979. And this is kind of actually, by the way, the starting point of our novel. In fact, when our novel starts, there is a monarchy, and we see when the Soviet Union comes and invades Afghanistan in 1979. This war would last until 1986, and it would end again with no true rule. Many people, many ethnicities were warring over power, but there was no definitive answer. Until, unfortunately, in 1999, when we see the Taliban go into Afghanistan and establish a power through definite fear. They were tyrannical and they were extremists in their religious views. Of course, banning anything, discriminating heavily against women, putting women to death, doing a lot of things that were really unsightly and unseemly. And of course, 9/11, many things change. The Taliban would lose official control when the U.S. would go into Afghanistan, excuse me. And there's a lot of struggles that still exist at this point because, again, there is still no definitive rule in Afghanistan. So this is the backdrop for our novel, okay? This is the backdrop for our novel. As I said, the novel starts around just before the Soviet Union comes in and overthrows the monarchy. And our narrator is basically a young Afghan boy, okay? And as you begin to read The Kiterunner, I want you to start thinking about the narrator, okay? First of all, is he omniscient? What does that mean? It means, is he all-knowing? Does he seem to know not only what his emotions and thoughts are, but those of other characters? So that's one aspect of a narrator. Also, is he telling the story as he's experiencing it? Or is he looking back on this situation and telling us about that? If in fact he is, It's a first person retrospective narration. And what comes from that, of course, is he has insight as an adult that he certainly would not have as a child. And so again, our narrator's name now is Amir, and I want you to get to know him and be able to describe him and be able to tell me what kind of narrator we have and how that shapes your perception of what's happening in the story. Be able to tell me what his ethnicity is and how does that figure into the story. And these are the things basically as you begin to read the Kiterunner that you need to understand. Now, if you do better with the written word, ladies and gentlemen, you'll notice that I have a written history of Afghanistan in this week's content. Read it over, check it out, okay? There's also, by the way, study guide questions. Now, please, please, I know about 17 of you out of the 24 we have in class are going to say, Mrs. Angel, do I have to answer the study guide questions and turn them in? And I'm going to say, no, you don't. They are a guide for you as you are reading the novel. Now, this is also on the home page, but I will reiterate, you do not have to write out answers for the study guide questions. They are to help you focus your reading, okay? So if you read through it and you're like, wow, wait a minute, I want to figure out what Mrs. Angel might find important, go back and look through them. You're certainly welcome to write down notes, and I won't promise you that some of these questions won't be questions on the quizzes that you have to take. However, I will not be checking to make sure you are answering the study guide questions, okay? So again, make sure you are at least in some general way familiar with the progression of Afghanistan history and as it pertains to the Kiterunner. And also start getting a feel for our narrator, who he is and why his ethnicity shapes the content of the novel. What kind of narrator? Is it a retrospective? Isn't it? Look into that, okay? All right, have a good time reading the first 9 chapters. I think you really will like it.